Following the brutal murder of a Kashmiri Pandit, Rahul Bhat, the Kashmir Valley is now in a state of unrest. Massive protests erupted in Jammu, with forces firing tear gas on protesters. Members of the Kashmiri Pandit community took to the streets in different parts of the Union Territory to protest against the brutal killings. Protesters blocked the Srinagar-Jammu National Highway near Vesu village on Thursday evening. The wife of Rahul Bhat says that her husband felt insecure while working in Budgam. He had made several requests to have him transferred to Jammu, but that fell on deaf ears. Slain Kashmiri Pandit, Rahul Bhat's mortal remains arrived in Jammu for final rites. Meanwhile, Ministry of Home Affairs, the officials, along with the IB, will review preparedness of Amarnath Yatra, which will be commencing from the 30th of June after a gap of about 2 years.
Justice! 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 Justice!
Cutting across to Sunilji Bhat, joining us live from the streets where protests are taking place. Sunilji Bhat, we know angry Kashmiri Pandits who have taken over the streets, they've blocked roads, they're raising slogans against the BJP government, against Prime Minister Modi, against Amit Shah, saying that the BJP government has failed them. They feel unsafe in the Kashmir Valley, they want to be rehabilitated, but all those pleas and requests have fallen on deaf ears.
Absolutely, Nabila. The Kashmiri Pandit community has been demanding it time and again that the government employees of the community who are serving in the Kashmir Valley should be shifted and they should be brought to Jammu, because the situation in the Kashmir Valley is not conducive for their survival. And in the recent past, time and again, the members of the Kashmiri Pandit community have been targeted by the terrorists. And the people are feeling very insecure there. They want that adequate security should be provided, and the government employees belonging to the minuscule minority of Kashmir, that is Kashmiri Pandit, should be brought to Jammu and to other safer areas. They are saying that the employment package that was announced in 2010 was a flawed one, and the Kashmiri Pandit youth were made to sign a bond that whatever may be the condition in the Kashmir Valley, they can't be transferred to Jammu or other places. So the people are saying that they are working as a bonded labor in the Kashmir Valley, the Kashmiri Pandit youth, and the government is totally indifferent towards their problems and sufferings. That is why now the patience of the Kashmiri Pandit community is running out. They are staging protests across the length and breadth of Jammu and Kashmir, and in other parts of the country we are hearing that the Kashmiri Pandit community members have hit the streets. Their only demand is that how long they are going to suffer like this. Time has come to give justice to the Kashmiri Pandit community, and the government must seriously look into their issues and mitigate their suffering. For last more than 3 decades, the community has been suffering at the hands of the terrorists and separatists, and the successive governments have also turned and Nelson's eye towards the Kashmiri Pandit community, and the members are very angry now. They are staging protests in Jammu, in Srinagar, in Budgam, and in other places also. What we are
see
learning
extensive protests on the streets of Kashmir there. Sunil, in fact, the wife of the slain Kashmir Pandit, Rahul Bhat, she speaks to India today, and she says that her husband, Rahul Bhat, has been feeling threatened ever since he was posted in Budgam. She narrates the horrific ordeal, says that he didn't feel safe in Budgam, requested a transfer, but that fell on deaf ears. People from his own office allegedly conspired with terrorists. These are claims of the Kashmiri Pandit who was murdered, his wife making these sensational claims. Will this be taken into record? That remains to be seen, but let's have a listen.
मुझे बताइए, जब राहुल भट्ट वहाँ 2010 में काम करने गए, तब से अब तक कभी उन्होंने आपसे कहा कि उनको कोई डर लगता है?
भैया, वो पहले इधर बड़गाम तहसील ऑफिस में थे, वहाँ पे कभी उनको कुछ लगा ही नहीं। डीसी को इन्होंने बहुत बारी बोला कि मेरे को ट्रांसफ़र उधर नहीं लेनी, वो दूर है, चारडूरा बहुत दूर है बड़गाम से। हम तो शेखपुरा में रहते हैं, वहाँ से बहुत दूर है। वो उसने पता नहीं कौन सी जिद निकाली, उसने 2 साल से उसकी ट्रांसफ़र ही नहीं की वापस वहाँ से। डीसी बड़गाम ने और एसीआर ने, जो नया एसीआर है, उसने पहले भी बोला था उनको कि मेरे को यहाँ से थोड़ा डीसी ऑफिस लाओ। जब पिछली बार उसका वो जो 2 मारे थे टीचर्स, तब हम फिर आए थे। मैंने इसको बोला था हम नहीं जाएंगे, मगर उसने नहीं माना, बोला मेरे को ड्यूटी जाना है। उन दिनों भी उनको बोला था इनको डीसी ऑफिस में ही रखो, वहाँ तब भी सेफ्टी है। इधर एक गार्ड नहीं था इसको बाहर। भैया, कितने लोग उसके पास आते थे, सर के ऊपर से लोग होते थे।
कोई सुरक्षा नहीं थी वहाँ?
कोई कुछ भी नहीं। एसडीएम ऑफिस साथ है, कोई एक गार्ड नहीं था बाहर जो चेक करता। इनके पास रिवॉल्वर थी, 3 बंदे थे, क्या सुनने में आया 3 बंदे थे। 3 बंदों के पीछे पूछा राहुल भट्ट कौन है,
अच्छा, नाम
नाम पूछ के गोली शूट किया। वो अपनी ही चेयर पे बैठा था, अपनी ही चेयर पे शूट किया उसको। भैया हिलने का भी मौका नहीं दिया। उसके पास लोग बहुत आते थे।
All right, there you have the wife who's really upset. She's, of course, she feels defeated, says that her husband made several pleas asking for a transfer because he didn't feel safe in Budgam. She accuses some of his own colleagues of conspiring with terrorists. These are her claims. These are really some sensational claims. Remember, her husband worked at a government office. He was a government employee. So if she's saying that some of his colleagues may have conspired with terrorists, that's certainly something that needs to be looked into. But Kashmiri Pandits at large in the Kashmiri Valley have constantly felt threatened, insecure. They faced all sorts of atrocities for decades in that region. And so far, so long, it seems like barely any government that has come into power there have been able to secure Kashmiri Pandit community adequately. Sunil Ji Bhatt is joining us live from that region, from Jammu in fact. Sunil, we know that protests have erupted in many parts of Kashmir. We're looking at candlelit protests. We're looking at people have come out on the streets, have blocked roads in those residential colonies where Kashmiri Pandits are living. Many of those transit camps, thousands of Kashmiri Pandits are now out on the streets demanding some kind of security and rehabilitation. Have they put out a list of demands while they come out protesting?
Well, Nabila, the Kashmiri Pandit government employees serving in the valley have mustered a lot of courage and they have hit the streets in different parts of the Kashmir Valley, whether it's Budgam, Srinagar, Anantnag, Vesu, Matan. They have been staging protests against the administration, and their main demand is that the government employees who are serving in the Kashmir Valley should be shifted to Jammu. They should be adjusted in Jammu because the situation in Kashmir Valley is not conducive for their survival. They want that adequate security must be provided forthright to the Kashmiri Pandit government employees who are serving, and they should be given adequate security. That's what the demand of the people is, and they want proper inquiry also into this killing that has taken place yesterday in central Kashmir's Budgam district. Many people are alleging, the family members are even alleging that there could be some of his own colleagues in his office who may have conspired with the terrorists, and they must have carried out this assassination of Rahul Bhat. Rahul Bhat's presence in the Kashmir Valley was like an eyesore for many, including his own colleagues. That's what the family members are alleging. They want a proper inquiry, and they want the killers of Rahul Bhat to be shot down as soon as possible. But Nabila, one important thing that comes to light is that government is making tall claims that they are doing this, they are doing that for the Kashmiri Pandits, but the fact of the matter remains that nothing is happening on ground. The Kashmiri Pandit community is suffering. They are in deep pain. They are in deep mourning, and they have to face the brunt of the violence that is being unleashed in the Kashmir Valley by the terrorists. And in the recent past, we have seen many killings have taken place, targeted, selective killings of the Kashmiri Pandit community. In the previous occasion, identity cards were even checked of the employees, of the Hindu employees who were serving in a school in Srinagar. So the situation is very volatile in the Kashmir Valley. The Kashmiri Pandit community has hit the streets, and we have seen very angry protests taking place. And even in Jammu, people are very angry. They have blocked many roads, and they are demanding justice. They want that the government must take some important steps to ensure that the community of Kashmiri Pandits is protected, is saved. They want that adequate security must be provided. That is point number one. Point number two, that all those government employees belonging to the Kashmiri Pandit community who are serving in the Kashmir Valley, they must be brought to Jammu, and they must be adjusted here, because the situation, the atmosphere in Kashmir Valley is not conducive for their survival. An atmosphere of fear is prevailing there, and particularly for the minuscule minority of Kashmir, that is Kashmiri Pandits, the situation is very pathetic. They are being targeted. They can't trust anyone there. That's what the community members are saying. And here we are with the family members and relatives of Rahul Bhat. They are in deep mourning. We spoke to many of their relatives earlier. They vented out their anger. We will again try and get a word from father of Rahul Bhat, Mr. Bitaji Bhat. Bitaji, आपकी बेटे की जिस प्रकार से आतंकवादियों ने हत्या की, इस समय समूचे कश्मीर में कश्मीरी पंडित समुदाय के युवक इस समय प्रदर्शन कर रहे हैं, नारेबाजी कर रहे हैं, क्या लग रहा है आपको, कुछ बदलाव आएगा?
कौन सा बदलाव आ गया? कौन सा बदलाव आज तक आ गया? आज 30 साल हो गए हमें ऐसे ही। चलो हमारा जो लुट गया सब लुट गया, अब क्या बोलूँ।
आपको लग रहा है कश्मीरी पंडित समुदाय बलि का बकरा बन रहा है?
बन गया, और क्या, हम तो बन गए बकरे।
इस समय अगर प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी और देश के गृह मंत्री अमित शाह आपको देख रहे हो, सुन रहे हो, क्या कहेंगे आप उन्हें?
क्या कह सकते हैं, हम क्या बोल सकते हैं? कम से कम प्रॉपर इंक्वायरी करा ले, ये कैसे हुआ, क्यों हुआ। जब प्रॉपर इंक्वायरी हो किसी मसले की, सही जजमेंट आए, तब ये लोग सुधर जाएंगे, वरना ऐसे कहाँ सुधरेंगे वो। किसी को सज़ा लगती नहीं है, जब सज़ा किसी को लगेगी, भुगतना पड़ेगा, तब जाकर कहीं ये हालात ठीक हो जाए।
आपकी बहू और राहुल भट्ट की पत्नी मीनाक्षी जी से हमने बात की, वो कह रही है कि हो सकता है उनके अपने दफ्तर में कुछ लोगों ने आतंकवादियों से षड्यंत्र रचाया।
वो हम नहीं बोल सकते हैं, हमें नहीं पता है।
तो अभी आप क्या चाहते हैं, कोई प्रॉपर इंक्वायरी होनी चाहिए?
प्रॉपर इंक्वायरी हो जी, प्रॉपर इंक्वायरी हो, प्रॉपर इंक्वायरी हो, ये देखा जाए कि कैसे ऑफिस में घुस गए बंदे और नाम लेकर बुलाया गया।
अच्छा, नाम उनका बुलाया गया?
नाम उनका बुलाया गया। राहुल कौन है, राहुल भट्ट कौन है? उसने बोला हाँ मैं हूँ, आ जाओ इधर, तो उसको गोली मार दी।
ऐसी स्थिति तो 1990 में थी कश्मीर घाटी में,
उससे बदतर ये है।
अभी लगता है आपको हालात बदतर हो रहे हैं कश्मीर में?
हमें क्या हालात के साथ, हमारा जो था वो सब हालात ही।
बिल्कुल, मैं समझ सकता हूँ, आप बहुत पीड़ा में हैं, हमारी संवेदना आपके साथ है। तो अभी सरकार को क्या कदम उठाने चाहिए ताकि कश्मीरी पंडित समुदाय के साथ न्याय?
हम इस वक्त
ठीक है,
गवर्नमेंट से पूछो।
You can see, Nabila, that the family is inconsolable. The family members are in deep pain. We can understand their suffering and pain, and we fully empathize with them, and we express our condolences to them. But Nabila, time and again, the Kashmiri Pandit community is being targeted by the terrorists. They are feeling insecure, and what the people here are saying, that the government is totally indifferent towards their plight, towards their suffering, and they are saying that the time has come to teach the terrorists a lesson, and the government must pursue a policy of hot pursuit against terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. Nabila, back to you.
You know, so awful. One can only imagine the pain that Kashmiri Pandit community is feeling right now. Targeted killings. At least 3 Kashmiri Pandits have been murdered since October. And it appears that Rahul Bhatt's murder too was certainly targeted. The Pandit community now out on the streets demanding some kind of security and protection at this point within the Kashmir Valley. The wife of the slain Kashmiri Pandit, Rahul Bhat, though, speaks to India today. She, in fact, narrates the horrific ordeal, saying that her husband, Rahul Bhat, felt unsafe in Budgam. He had requested for a transfer and says that people in his own office may have conspired with terrorists to kill him. Let's have a listen.
मुझे बताइए, जब राहुल भट्ट वहाँ 2010 में काम करने गए, तब से अब तक कभी उन्होंने आपसे कहा कि उनको कोई डर लगता है?
भैया, वो पहले इधर बड़गाम तहसील ऑफिस में थे, वहाँ पे कभी उनको कुछ लगा ही नहीं। डीसी को इन्होंने बहुत बारी बोला कि मेरे को ट्रांसफ़र उधर नहीं लेनी, वो दूर है, चारडूरा बहुत दूर है बड़गाम से, हम तो शेखपुरा में रहते हैं, वहाँ से बहुत दूर है। वो उसने पता नहीं कौन सी जिद निकाली, उसने 2 साल से उसकी ट्रांसफ़र ही नहीं की वापस वहाँ से। डीसी बड़गाम ने और एसीआर ने, जो नया एसीआर है, उसने पहले भी बोला था उनको कि मेरे को यहाँ से थोड़ा डीसी ऑफिस लाओ। जब पिछली बार उसका वो जो 2 मारे थे टीचर्स, तब हम फिर आए थे, मैंने इसको बोला था हम नहीं जाएंगे, मगर उसने नहीं माना, बोला मेरे को ड्यूटी जाना है। उन दिनों भी उनको बोला था इनको डीसी ऑफिस में ही रखो, वहाँ तब भी सेफ्टी है। इधर एक गार्ड नहीं था इसको बाहर, भैया कितने लोग उसके पास आते थे, सर के ऊपर से लोग होते थे,
कोई सुरक्षा नहीं थी वहाँ,
कोई कुछ भी नहीं। एसडीएम ऑफिस साथ है, कोई एक गार्ड नहीं था बाहर जो चेक करता। इनके पास रिवॉल्वर थी, 3 बंदे थे, क्या सुनने में आया, 3 बंदे थे। 3 बंदों के पीछे पूछा राहुल भट्ट कौन है।
अच्छा, नाम
पूछ के गोली शूट किया। वो अपनी ही चेयर पे बैठा था, अपनी ही चेयर पे शूट किया उसको, भैया हिलने का भी मौका नहीं दिया। उसके पास लोग बहुत आते थे।
कल जब सुबह वो दफ्तर से निकले, आपकी कुछ बातचीत हुई थी जाने से पहले?
दफ्तर तो वो रोज़ ही निकलते थे। मैंने 10 मिनट पहले उनको फ़ोन किया था, हमारे घर में काम चल रहा था, मैंने बोला हो गया पूरा, मैंने बोला आ जाना जल्दी। वो तो ठीक है। तो उसी के 5 मिनट के बाद ही वो उधर आए। मैंने उसको क्यों नहीं बोला तो अभी निकल, मैं उसको बोलती थी मत जाओ उधर, डीसी ऑफिस ट्रांसफर करा ले, छोड़ दे नौकरी, हमको नौकरी भी नहीं चाहिए। मुझे पता है तू वहाँ पे सारी जगह तेरे को जानते हैं, सारे जानते, बोलते हैं मैं सेफ रहूँगा, मुझे सारे जानते हैं। उसको नहीं पता था उनमें कोई निकलेगा, उनमें गरीबों की भी बहुत मदद करता था।
तो आपको लगता है कि सरकार कश्मीरी पंडित समुदाय के प्रति गंभीर नहीं?
बकरा बना रही है, बलि का बकरा बना रही है उधर, वो कुछ नहीं सोच रही है, ना सेफ्टी का ना कुछ। वो वहाँ पे बलि के बकरे हैं सारे, जाके काटेंगे ही उनको।
Now going over to Sunil Ji Bhatt, who's been tracking those developments. Sunil, it's so heartbreaking to see how the family of Rahul Bhat are devastated. They say that they've been demanding for a transfer. They've been requesting, begging, saying that they've not been feeling safe in Budgam, but that fell on deaf ears. Really, none heard their pleas, and eventually, finally, we saw this kind of fate. Unfortunately, he was murdered by a terrorist. It looks like a very targeted attack. At least 3 people have been murdered. 2 of them have been injured, all Kashmiri Pandits, since October. So we're seeing a series of cases where targeted attacks are being reported, particularly of Kashmiri Pandits. This is scary, and that really clearly establishes why the Kashmiri Pandit overwhelmingly in the valley region are now feeling threatened.
Absolutely, Nabila. The killing of Rahul Bhat has sent shockwaves across the country, and particularly among the Kashmiri Pandit community. The community feels that the government is using the Kashmiri Pandit youth as cannon fodder in order to portray a rosy picture of Kashmir Valley. They are saying that time and again the Kashmiri Pandit community has been demanding that the government employees who belong to Kashmiri Pandit community should be shifted to Jammu and adjusted here. But all their pleas are falling to deaf ears. The administration is not taking any favorable decision, and it's the Kashmiri Pandit community which has to pay a heavy price of the government's indifference. In the last 2-3 years, we have seen series of killings that have taken place in the Kashmir Valley, whether it was Ajay Pandita, Rakesh Pandita, Makhalal Bindru, and then 2 teachers belonging to Hindu and Sikh community in a school. Their identity cards were checked and they were assassinated, and it seems that the government hasn't taken any lesson. No adequate security is being provided to the minuscule minority of Kashmir, that is Kashmiri Pandits, and that is why we are seeing that killings are taking place in Kashmir Valley, and there is no end to this bloodbath in the Kashmir Valley. And it is the Kashmiri Pandit community and the other religious minorities who are facing the brunt of the violence that is being unleashed by the terrorists in the Kashmir Valley. Now the Kashmiri Pandit community is demanding that enough is enough. Time has come that the government takes some strong steps. The Kashmiri Pandit government employees who are serving in the valley must be moved to Jammu. They should be adjusted here because the atmosphere that is prevailing in Kashmir Valley is of fear right now, and the situation is not conducive for the survival of the Kashmiri Pandit community in the Kashmir Valley. And they are saying that the community cannot become scapegoat in this entire scheme of things that are taking place. They are saying that the community members are being used as cannon fodder, and this will not be tolerated by the Kashmiri Pandit community. And that is why we are seeing that protests are taking place in Kashmir Valley, in Jammu region, and in other parts of the country, and people are hitting the streets. They want justice. They want this bloodshed to end. Nabila.
Right, you know, at this moment we see that tear gas shells were fired. We also saw the military on ground trying to quell those violent protests. How is the district administration managing the protesters? Have they been spoken to? Is there any coordination happening right now between the government officials and the Kashmiri Pandit community? Any way that they can be convinced? All right, before that, I'm going to cut across to some political reactions coming in on this.
कश्मीरी पंडित समाज ने एक अपना होनहार नौजवान खोया है। स्वाभाविक है, लोगों में बहुत गुस्सा है। जिन परिजनों ने अपने ब्लड रिलेशन में अपने रिश्तेदार को, अपने परिवार के सदस्य को खोया है, यकीनन उनको गुस्सा है। ये पाकिस्तान के जो कायर आतंकवादियों ने घटना की है, इसके विरुद्ध पूरे जम्मू कश्मीर में, पूरे हिंदुस्तान में गुस्सा है। इन सभी कायर पाकिस्तानी आतंकवादियों को जमीन के पाताल से निकाल कर इनको मौत के घाट उतारेंगे। किसी पाकिस्तानी को, किसी दहशतगर्द को नहीं बख्शेंगे।
हमें भी इस चीज़ का दुख हो रहा है, और इस प्रकार की घटनाएं होने से कहीं ना कहीं जो शांति प्रक्रिया का प्रोसेस चल रहा है उसमें कई अड़चन आती है। लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि जल्द ही इन लोगों का जो गुस्सा है, कश्मीरी पंडित मुलाजिमों को सुरक्षा के साथ किस प्रकार से हम करें, इसके लिए केंद्र में भी बात की जाएगी और ललित जी एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में भी बात की जाएगी।